Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble. Today, we are chatting with Jimmy Zito. Jimmy is a writer, a youth developer, and he has a joy for teaching science to kids. Jimmy also has his own podcast and YouTube channel called Life to the Full. On the podcast, he takes a look at the Bible through a whole new lens. Jimmy has been following the beat of his own drum and questioning traditions. We're really looking forward to learning more about Jimmy's pirate journey today. So welcome, Jimmy.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. So Jimmy, you've been following your own path and asking uncomfortable questions. Will you just pull up a stool and weave us a tale of your pirate journey?
Oh man. Well, I feel like I've kind of always been a pirate at heart. Like I've always kind of rebelled against like the status quo. I was a Boy Scout. I don't know if you guys were like in the Scouts at all. I don't know what they have in Canada.
Yep. Brownies, Girl Guides.
Oh yeah. So I was like really into like all that stuff, learning how to do everything, but I was so anti-establishment that I would never test for any merit badges. Even though like I would like teach other kids like the stuff. I'd be like, no, I don't want any labels. I'm not going to conform to your system, man. And I was like 10. They were like, could you just relax? Like, this is going to be good one day on your resume. Why don't you become like an Eagle Scout, which like is the highest you can get here? And they're like, that looks good on the resume. I was like, whatever. I don't want them to judge me based on some artificial rules. Yeah, I was like I think I was always kind of a pirate at heart. But in terms of like what I've been doing now, I've been doing a lot of work with the Bible and my church. Kind of the church tradition I used to be a part of just trying to just help people look at the Bible differently and kind of take that away. I think the Bible for many years has been used as a tool to control and to kind of, do a lot of harm, do a lot more harm than good in the world. And I want to do something about that. I don't know how much I'll be able to do, soft talk acknowledged, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm just really curious, as I know Chris and I both have had sort of a religious upbringing, me being Catholic. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about how you're looking at the Bible in a different way.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic too. How was your experience growing up Catholic?
Well, I mean, I went to Catholic school and, Sunday school, and there was just a lot of church, confirmation, your communion, all of that stuff. So it was interesting. It was an interesting experience. Eventually moving, and this is, I guess, would be more on the school system, but moving from the Catholic kind of private school into a public high school. That was a really interesting transition for me in terms of like grades and my education. And even just fitting in after being in a school uniform for most of my life and not, understanding anything about fashion or what other cool kids were wearing. So yeah, I mean, growing up Catholic in a Catholic school was interesting for me as a kid, for sure.
Yeah. I think most people move away, like even if they stay like on paper they're a Catholic. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people move away from it because it just doesn't seem very relevant for like real life, like mm-hmm. what's going on day to day. Like God is there maybe somewhere, I don't necessarily understand. Like some of my favorite priests growing up, they would be the ones that would like curse, and they liked wrestling and stuff, and like I just thought they were like cool. But the priests that kind of taught me, they were always really more concerned of like, well, you have to just learn how to be a good person. You have to learn how to be a good human being. It's not about all these things. But kind of like on my way out of my Catholic education, I went all the way from kindergarten to high school. Like I felt like they had almost done too good of a job of teaching me church history, where I was just like, this has to all be made up. This is ridiculous. Like this is not, if it's not made up, like God has a lot of things to answer for. And I kind of just moved away from that. I guess I became an atheist, for lack of a better term, for a while. But like I think most people hear atheist, they're like, oh, like some grumpy person sitting in the corner, like, like I hate God and I hate all of you. Where for me, atheism was more of just like, I just believed in the humanity. I believed in humanity. I believe that humanity really could do a lot of really great things if we could just all come together. And I think that's what Christianity was supposed to be. People all coming together, doing great things in the world. And I think through the ages, we kind of just really lost our way. We really lost what we were doing. We lost our connection to the scriptures and what they were trying to teach us. And so that's kind of like my own journey. And then in college, I ended up meeting a bunch of people that were really into the Bible, and they really took the Bible seriously, but they also wanted to make the world a really much better place. They were very mission minded for just little things, not necessarily for like children or going off someplace else and planting churches, but for actually making people's lives better in a moment. And they very much use the Bible as a weapon. Like, these are the scriptures you need to follow. These are the paths you need to walk. And I'm still very grateful for it, because they did teach me how to appreciate the Bible a lot more. I didn't really appreciate the Bible growing up in Catholic school. I kind of spent most of the time like daydreaming, like during religion class, and actually looking through the Bible, which we never really opened. And I remember one time I got to like the book of Revelation. I was like, wait, there's dragons in here. What? Could we talk about that? Like, instead of like the spiritual works of mercy, I want to talk about this really rad dragon here. Like, that sounds awesome. Yes, sign me up for that. And so, through the years of being part of this tradition, where, they do, on paper, they say they take the Bible seriously, but in reality, it's more of just about following a whole bunch of rules. If you follow all these rules, life will go great. Which we all know that doesn't happen. That takes just a few years in for when you're like, I don't buy this anymore, And then from there, I really learned how to just read the Bible on its own terms. And I was like, wow, these stories are beautiful. And so my mission kind of now of what I'm doing the podcast is I'm trying to educate those who are still part of the tradition I was a part of. Like, hey, like we can do better. Like there's more stuff in here than just judging people, who's in the club, who's out of the club. How can we make it so that when a Christian shows up, people are like, yes, a Christian, instead of like the usual response, which is, this guy's a Christian. Great. And the other thing is like people who, they don't want anything to do with God. They don't want anything to do with the church. I think everyone is deeply spiritual, on some level, and I think that like we have different names for it. And I want to kind of give the gift that's the Bible back to people like that, because there's so much truth in these stories. And even if you don't want to call it God or Christianity, these stories have been like studied for so long, and they were written down in such a long period of time. It really is like a treasure, like, like these stories that people have been thinking about and poring over for, hundreds, if not thousands of years. I think it just shows a lot of cycles. It shows a lot of truth about the human condition. And I really do think it's speaking into every age and just trying to, push the story of humanity forward. So my mission is kind of twofold. So I've been doing classes for people in my church, and I've been trying to figure out like, okay, what do I do with everyone else? How do I help people just, I'm not looking for them to like, make Jesus the Lord and Savior of their life necessarily. But how can I give them back the Bible and some of these stories that can really help their own experience?
Yeah, I really like that, because, I love what you said about Catholic on paper. That's I would say that describes, my Catholicism, with the occasional, midnight mass at Christmas if my mom drags me.
Right.
But what those years in, Catholic school, what I feel it gave me was actually appreciation for the Bible as a really great collection of stories, as you said, like a great literary work that, first of all, when I do have debates about religion with people, I am coming from a place of knowledge or some sort of understanding. I've debated religion with people that have never touched or cracked open a Bible. And I feel like those debates are just, well, I'm like, well, have you read it? Because, there's some really good stories in there. Like you said, some really good parables and learnings for people about how to be, good and kind humans. And you're right, there is a lot of rules, and I think it definitely is the rules that that's scared me off, at least. Being being a pirate, I'm not really one to be told what I can and cannot do in my throughout my life. Like, that just didn't sit well with me. So I really love what you're talking about kind of reclaiming the Bible for what it is, whether or not that turns into like a complete appreciation for religion, or a complete or more of appreciation for what it is as a book of literature.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys follow Jordan Peterson at all, but he's I think he would classify himself as an atheist, and he does a whole series of lectures on like the first biblical stories. And he was saying in one of his biblical lecture series, that's what they're called, is that the problem with most atheists is that they don't take the Bible seriously enough. Like, it's one thing to say, okay, like there's not some bearded guy up in heaven, like, like determining whether we're gonna, suffer for eternity in heaven or hell. But it's quite another thing not to take these stories seriously, because like you say, like these stories are really, really powerful. And, I think, a lot of times, like, we ignore them. Even in my religious community, like a lot of people I'm learning as I'm going through a lot of these classes, they don't necessarily want to learn how to read the Bible, which it's been shocking to me, because I'm like, look, this is crazy. This changes everything. And they're like, okay, like still feeling like they identify as a Christian, even though like, they're not really acting very Christian. And in my own experience, unfortunately, I've said this now for many years, and it really kind of bothered people in my tradition. I've encountered more people who act like a Christian outside of the church than I do inside the church. And to me, I find that to be like a really big tragedy, because it's just like, why? why has this happened? And yeah, so I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Should I try?
Yeah,
Go for it.
All right. I either need to talk really fast or really slow. So, one thing with what you were just saying, it was, the whole people outside of the church for humanity than inside the church, where there were several that I attended in my many moves after getting married. There were messages mostly about like giving money or putting a whole bunch of attention and money toward the building, toward the music. The service is flashy, and then when it comes to the holidays coming around and you start talking about these people in need, and like putting something together and doing something for the people there who need things and who may want to be able to celebrate the holiday. We start looking out at the other countries. Let's send our missionaries out here, or let's give more money into the church. And instead of looking, we create change within the local communities, and how can we best benefit the people. And that was one thing that really stuck out to me. And Lance, around that, like, we're so busy looking out instead of trying to better within our own community and then supporting them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always struggled with like church mission trips because I'm like, do we really need to go to Africa and build a school? Do they really not know how to build a building there? I think they do. They've been building stuff there for a very long time. I think they'll be okay without us. In terms of like, I do think there's so many problems here at home, with each other, with the people that are in, our building or in our congregation, like just fixing that, you know? And in many ways, I think what we've designed, it's getting the problem, a lot of the problems that we have now. I think churches need to collect money. Churches need things, right? And I think like they do spend a lot of time talking about that instead of dealing necessarily with some of the deeper issues. And I think people eventually end up turning to philosophy, or other things that they're not, where there's a lot of wisdom there in the scriptures that could actually help them if we started to kind of like learn how to use it. Like I think in a lot of ways, like especially in the tradition I'm from, we love rules. So we love telling people what to do. Well, like me, not so much anymore. But like we love it. Okay, here's everything you need to do. Oh, you're struggling with this. Let me help you. Turn here, boom, 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 boom. Versus like I think the way the Bible actually operates is like when you come to it with your deep problems, it's like we'll sit down. Let me tell you a story. A long time ago, there was a garden. There were these two people, and it kind of goes on from there. And it's like I think a few hours in, you still haven't gotten that concrete answer, but making space in your heart and in your life to have these stories work on you, I think in the end of the day is much more beneficial than any answer we can give each other, because I often feel like, oh, I can solve someone else's problems in 5 minutes. I feel like that. I don't think that's actually true. But, like my own problems, like, like, oh, no one can solve those. Those are impossible. The whole victim mentality with this, whole lifted spirit that we're part of, which in many ways to me is like, it's the most Christian thing I've ever encountered in my life. Just that spirit of freeing people from that victim mentality. Never encountered anything like that in the church. And I want to bring that to people eventually, though I haven't figured out the right form to do that. But there is this slavery idea in the Bible to, what Paul would call the powers, which definitely seek to divide humanity and make problem other people. If we could just fix these other people, if we could like, in ancient times, if we could just kill all these other people groups and just have our tribe, will be amazing, right? I guess we still do some of that too on the global stage. But I think nowadays it's kind of more of like, well, I'm very critical of the way this person does that. I'm very critical of the way this person does that. If everyone would just listen to me, we would do much better. Where I think like a better approach is kind of trying to figure out how can we all come together, not be the same, but come together and just really try and make this world a better place. And that's what I think that is what our Enlifted community has done, and it's been very humbling to me. And it's been just such a great experience to get to bring that to other people.
Well, and I'm curious, one of the things that you guys are talking about is like, that whole thing of like, well, we need to go to Africa to build a school rather than taking care of people that are here. Yeah. One of the things that kind of turns me away from religion is really that history and that tie with colonialism.
Yeah.
Right. And so we still have that history and going to do missions and all of these things in other countries. We're trying to, turn everybody Christian. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that, on that history and that ties and how that affects you in the work that you do.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think Catholics actually do a much better job of identifying with the past, things like slavery and colonialism, which have been used, by the church in the past. Like, like there's scriptures that people would turn to justify these things, but I feel like most Christians don't feel any connection to that. Like, that's not my problem. That was ignorant people. Those are people who, were less somehow than us moderns. We know what we're doing. So for me, like, I look at that as a cautionary tale of like, okay, they were pulling out scriptures and verses to say why, Western society was better, why European society was better, and we needed to go into places like South America and Africa, and we needed to like take their stuff because they wouldn't know how to use it properly anyway. And things like, slavery, like using like scriptures to justify why certain races or peoples, from different parts of the world were almost like subhuman compared to like, truly human. And, for me, I feel that that's a huge cautionary tale about, well, what are we getting wrong today? Like, I think when you use that scripture verse type of thinking, you can justify almost anything. And that's why we have like 30,000 denominations of Protestantism, because it's, I disagree with you a few things. Here's my scriptures and verses. The other person's like, oh no, here's my scriptures and verses. You're clearly wrong. No, you're wrong. And then, we go down the road and we start another church. And then, we'll make those sermons all about, or our teaching all about how we're right and everyone else is wrong. And I think in many ways, we're so missing the point. The point is never empire building. The point is never breaking us up into these fractions. But I do think there are some type of like powers present that are trying to keep all these people apart. And I call them powers because I'm not necessarily sure if like calling them angels or demons kind of paints the right picture, because that's almost like too human. Like, we think of like a guy in a red suit kind of going like, ha, 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 like causing trouble, where I think there's just something fundamentally wrong about humanity, where we just want to be separate. We don't want to be together. We want to fight each other in marriages and relationships and friendships. Like you can be great friends with somebody when you just meet them, but just give it a year, give it 2 years. There's going to be stuff. It's almost like, yeah.
Oh God, Kristen.
Oh no.
We've only got a year left.
Better get as many out as possible.
That's right. But it takes a person really like loving somebody to like overcome that force. If you try and put like two like magnets together of the same pole, they kind of push each other apart. But there is a way that they come together, and it's just figuring out how to bring things together, bring people together. So I think it's really important for us to remember that, like people have used the Bible in ways that we would call them monstrous today. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with me, but what are we doing today? And I don't think the church has been doing a great job of bringing people together. I think it focuses more on their power, what they have, and trying to, say who's right, who's wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting how, growing up in the church, now as an adult, it's less about the spiritual belief being in place rather than like the not wanting to be part of like that organized religion and all those, like you said, those different factions. And I really love the term that you use, weaponizing the Bible. I think that is, I can speak for me personally, what I've stepped away from, rather than any beliefs in God or any sort of a spiritual belief and practice, which has obviously evolved over time in the years.
Right.
But yeah, it's more of the distrust, I would say, for organized religions. Right. And what their history, which is not great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not great at all. And I think just taking that accountability, like, like, okay, like that was hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, but I should still take responsibility because that could have easily been me. That could have easily been me.
Well, it's not even that long ago. I mean, looking at the, especially up in here in Canada, we've been finding a lot of children's graves at the residential schools and realizing that these residential schools, closed in like the 80s.
Wow.
It's not that long ago, right? No. And most of them were Catholic. And, as someone raised Catholic, trying to deal with, the guilt of being associated with a religion that has that kind of past. And I do like what you say about, okay, well, how are we using it today? What is the cautionary tale, and what better can we do now? And I think the wounds are still so fresh. Like I know, especially up here in Canada, it's been big news. Over the last, few 6 months. I don't know. Time is so confusing. It was like the before pandemic time and the post pandemic time. But it's really interesting how it's really brought that past up to the forefront now of people's minds. Yeah.
And there's probably like a lot of covering up, a lot of like, no explanation, like where did this come from? It's there's no ownership.
And even worse, there's been some trying to explain the good that's come out of residential schools, which is just even worse. An apology, a heartfelt apology of what's happened and a way to move forward would be better than trying to defend what happened not that long ago in the recent history. Anyways.
Yeah, the 80s. It's like yesterday.
Yeah.
Feels like, right?
Well, when you get to a certain age, the 80s does feel like yesterday.
Yeah. I love when when I work with schools and some of the science stuff I do. I love when they remind me that they're like, "Oh, how was the 1900s?" Like tell us about that. I'm like,
I love it. I had one kid do that at like early 2000s. He's like, "You were born in the 1900s?" Like, yes, I was. Kid that also barely missed that.
Yeah. Or when I go to the supermarket, if I'm buying an alcoholic beverage, they just look for the 19 now.
I know.
I'm like, great.
Yeah. I know. It's been a while since I've gotten ID'd. That's just rude.
It's Wegmans. They ID everyone. They make me feel great every time.
Okay, so if my internet will let me, I would like to touch a little on the mysticism part. So like the Old Testament is very much like the Jewish tradition there. That's Jewish tradition is based off the Old Testament. And at least my experience is that even though the Old Testament the Jewish culture has been rejected. And so Schaefer Bloom, who we interviewed way back, she has been teaching me a lot of like that and the things that are actually in the Bible that reality is based around. Things that have been not talked when I was growing up. So I want to know a little bit, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah. Well, Christian mysticism is something that has a very long tradition. That's kind of been very forgotten. I think even in Judaism of Jesus's day, there were various sects, and some of them, moved quite away from mysticism into more of what we see today, like the Pharisees, looking for those laws and rules, which most of Christianity is more like a Pharisee than we would care to admit. But there is this long strain of mysticism in the Bible. And have you guys ever heard of the 4 sources for the Torah?
Mm-mm.
So the idea is that whoever brought this stuff together, they took different sources and they created one story. So there was like the P source, which is like the priestly source. There was the D source, which is Deuteronomy. That's most of the book of Deuteronomy. And then there was a source called J, which was for Yahweh. And so that's like the name of God. And that source is very much like, that's the one, the Yahweh source is the one of, God in the garden of Adam and Eve. He almost kind of seems like a person you could go have a beer with. It's like an actual being. Like, there's like a story, like he panics. He's like, what do I do? What's going on? And I think so one of the things I love about that is that I think the Hebrew scriptures have captured a conversation that we don't really know much about, but we know that when they brought this together, they didn't feel the need to edit those conversations out and make them talk to each other friendly. And I think what most people don't realize is that the whole Bible works like that. The Bible is in a conversation with itself. And I think, humanity in a conversation with forces outside of themselves has been like the spiritual mystical experience like throughout the ages, and I think anyone who's walked in a desert at night and looked up at the stars, anyone who's been like alone by the sea, and just in these lonely places of like the world and the forests, I think they'll touch into something that maybe they don't have a name for it. But what about if that thing that people are touching into and they're feeling that connection to something outside themselves? What about if that thing tried to make contact with us at some point and has been trying to make contact with us? It's not just about, like having a cool trip, right? When you have like these mystical experiences, what about if there's actually something trying to communicate with us and trying to like save us from ourselves in a sense? And that's kind of like my broad stroke of the mystical experience. And I think there's various echoes of it that are still like all around us that people don't even realize. Like if you think about saying the rosary, right, in the Catholic tradition, that was a meditative practice of repeating words and phrases over and over and over again to like induce some type of mystical experience where you're looking for answers. You're looking for answers, or you're looking for that connection with something beyond yourself. So there's a long tradition. There's a lot of rejected books that were very, very mystical that we found, which are quite surprising. There's The Shepherd of Hermas. I don't know if you guys have heard of this one. It's such a cool book. It's it reads like a little bit ridiculous at some points, but so it's this guy. He's like a shepherd of Hermas, right? And he has these experiences with this divine person, this figure that tries to guide and interact with his life. And it's from about 200 years after Jesus. And the greatest thing about this thing, and a lot of people are starting to take this more seriously, especially in the spaces that I've been working in, because it shows that early Christianity had a sense of mysticism and this idea that the spiritual realm would still be interacting with us and would be like intimately concerned with what we're doing. It wants to have, instead it's like we almost have like a deist view of God now. Like God is like the ultimate clockmaker and he like wound up the universe and he just like let us, like we don't see God working on the world stage anymore. And I think he's trying to, we're just not listening to his voice, and I think there's like hidden in the scriptures, and Schieffer is like absolutely right. There's little like trails that you can follow, almost like trails like through a wilderness, and you can find God. You can find an experience of God by following those trails. If like, you just look for them, you just look for them and you follow them. Like the Bible is actively trying to mess with you. There's no question about it. Like there's things like when you read it, you're like, wait a minute, what? Like, like how does that make sense? And I think the Bible is trying to get us to walk down some of these paths and ask some of these questions.
Yeah, like there's giants in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't know that until I was in college. I had a friend that was like, they Nephilim in the Bible. I was like, no, they don't. I've read the Bible. And they're like, she's like, yeah, they do.
Yep. Yeah, the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The sons of God. Yep.
Yeah, and I went and read it, and I'm like, like
yeah.
there are angels, sons of God. They're talking about like human. They're talking about giants. I'm like, what? That's in the Bible?
Yeah.
Well, so are these in more of the older scriptures?
No, they all do it. Even the New Testament. They're all trying to get you to question. So with the New Testament, outside of the Gospels, you're getting more of reflections back on the Old Testament. So like the stuff Paul does, a lot of times, you you can even see it the way he moves through stuff. He's assuming that you've spent like months with him going into something, and he'll just like mention it, you know, and then he'll move on. But yes, definitely in the Old Testament, those core stories, like the first 5 books, like it's definitely trying to mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, and what I wonder is it a way to ease that link or that transition from like more paganism? So taking some of those old pagan stories and incorporating into, the Christian stories in order to like help people transition from their old beliefs into the newer beliefs.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we're talking about things like giants or other, other stories in the Bible that don't feel maybe incredibly traditionally Christian.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things that in the Bible that come from, the pagan religions that have been kind of morphed over time, right? So
Yes.
with these other stories that we're talking about, or the mysticism, could that be something that's just more of that ease that transition? Because we're trying to get the people, the pagans, to believe in this religion, and the best way is to incorporate some of the things that the pagans actually believed in, right?
Yeah.
I was just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, I was wondering, because that's a big topic. But I think one thing that most people assume wrongly about the Bible is that the Bible is strictly monotheist.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Bible only says that there's God, there's one creator God, and that's it. And the Bible makes it very clear that there are other spiritual beings out there that do have power. They do have things. It's just that Yahweh is like the creator God. So he made all of these things, and some of them have rebelled against him. Like in the Exodus, he goes in, he says, I'm not going to crush Pharaoh. I'm not here to judge Pharaoh. I'm here to judge the gods of Egypt. And every single plague kind of unravels all of these Egyptian gods' powers. And then when you get to Christianity, I think Christianity starts moving into these spaces where, if you think about like Halloween, Christmas, all of these are like pagan holidays. I think people in general just create culture, whether we want to or not. Like you get a group of people together, a culture is going to form. And I think as Christianity moved in these different realms, they took things, that it's just reflected a lot of those mystical experiences that, were just already there, like, and so a lot of these like other spiritual beings in the Bible, they're not all bad. And even the ones that have rebelled, a lot of times it's unclear in the Bible whether all of them rebelled because they had that intention, or they rebelled because they're reflecting us. They're reflecting people and what people have done, so yeah, I think, yes, I agree.
Yeah, and I mean when I'm thinking about it, it makes sense. I mean, the very first of the 10 Commandments is "Thou shalt not have other gods before me." So you can have some after you. Okay, I'm the first God, and then you can worship whatever afterwards. I mean, the fact that it needed to be spelled out in the Bible, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like it would be really like almost strange if there were no other like spiritual beings, and God's like, you can't have any except me. Like, he's laughing at them because they're so dumb.
Yeah.
They believe in one another. Yeah, exactly. Which it's another thing's interesting too. It's like, because even in, thou shalt not have, gods before me, don't make an idol, the first two, right? Like even in the whole golden calf incident, which, broad strokes of the Bible, pretty much we're all aware of this. That golden calf was actually Yahweh. They were making an image of Yahweh, which was, it's very interesting because, we're not allowed to make idols, right? But God did. God made an image, and that image is us.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, like, don't make another image of me because I already did, you know? And there's a way that we're supposed to reflect that divine nature into the world that, I mean, I don't think you can get really more mystical than that. You know, when you start following that down, what does that mean? You know, like, to the human condition. You know, people like, we're only human. No, you're human. you're human. You're supposed to, I think we all know we're supposed to be more. We're supposed to be more than what we are. And I think the mystical experience calls us to that. And, you know, you can follow it and, you know, see where it takes you.
Oh, I was thinking back to the sons and daughters of God. Actually,
that's an awesome rabbit hole.
If you start hearing a bunch of clunking in the background, my garbage truck's coming through. But
Gotcha.
I have a friend that one time said that putting in that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God is where the division actually started. He called it the greatest lie that Christianity is told, because Jesus wasn't saying he was the only Son of God. He was saying he is a Son of God. We're all of God. And the idea was that he was opening up the door of like, we're all sons and daughters of God who get to dwell with him and dine with him. And the greatest lie that was told was saying that there's only one, because now we have division between God.
Yeah. That's an interesting observation. You know, like, I could see that. I could see that happening. You know, sons of God, you know, could refer to spiritual beings in the Bible as well. It can also refer to Israel when it's doing, when it's at its best. You know, God's like, oh, those are my sons, you know, but only when we're doing good stuff. Otherwise, he's ready to, like, destroy them and, you know,
send them away.
turn them back to dust or whatever. But yeah, I think, you know, a lot of things, I think it's the sin of certainty too. Like, we want to be certain. We want safety, and we think safety is being certain. You know, having a safe Bible, having a safe community, you know, none of us are safe. Like, you know, safety is a huge illusion. And I think we just have to become more and more uncomfortable with being not safe, you know, and being uncertain, and just letting go. Let go. It's going to be okay. You know, we don't have to control everything. I like to control things.
Yeah.
Yeah, learning to surrender.
Yep, exactly.
I paused or froze. That leads me to as well that nobody coming to save you. And I would say within Christianity, I feel like Jesus has become the lifeboat of, there is somebody coming to, and then you fall into these rules too. So with that one coming to save you, I guess my question is, what are your thoughts with that, with tying that into the whole idea of Christianity giving a savior, being like, no, there is, right here, here's your savior.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, a lot of people think the point of Christianity is heaven and hell. You know, how do I get to heaven, and how do I escape going to hell? And I mean, the idea on itself is just absurd. If you think about, like, in terms of, like, infinity or eternity, like, maybe you live to be 70, maybe you live to be 100. Like, where you're going to spend eternity is based on, like, that little short amount of time. And it's just not in the Bible. That's the first thing that kind of led me on the journey I'm on, is I actually read the Bible, and I'm like, there's no heaven and hell in here. What do you, I mean, there's a little bit, but, like, it's near the end, and it's like, it seems like Jesus was talking about something else here when he was like, he's the one who talks the most about hell. He talks about, like, more like a present state, like something you can be experiencing right now than something that's going to happen to you later. So, but then, okay, what's salvation? I think salvation is the now and the not yet. Like, what Jesus did opened up a pathway where we don't have to be slaves to these powers that want to divide us. So we get to live like true human beings now. And there's the future hope that everything is going to be restored, like not destroyed, but like restored into like what it was originally supposed to be like, that's the way I think the Bible conceives of it. And, but it's a tough topic because most people just be like, I don't believe in that heaven and hell stuff. And it's like, great, me either. Let's have a talk.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your programs that you've got going on?
Sure. So currently I'm doing things where I do teaching in small groups. For lack of a better term, I'd probably call it deconstruction, which is very like a dirty term in like the religious world. It's like, ooh, deconstruction. Don't bring that to my church. But really that's what it is. It's questioning the whole religious architecture and just taking the Bible on its own terms. Like, the Bible is like the original hyperlink doc. So it connects with everything. And it's like, it can be really overwhelming for people at first, but there's ways to get into that and do that. So I do that with people who are already in a church tradition. I do that in a small group setting, and then I record it. I live stream it. So I have some people who are following me along. While I'm doing it, I have some people in the online classroom with me. And that's kind of like where I've been. And then the other side of it is just trying to create community of like wherever you are, Christian, not Christian, just communities of life, communities of love, where people are really coming together and really just trying to, add value to the world. So that's kind of two parts of my mission right there.
And where can people find out more about you, learn more about what you're doing? And
probably Instagram. I don't really post as well as my wife. My wife is always like, you need to up your social media game, and I'm like, what is that? Probably Instagram. I think it's life to the full instead of TO. It's a number 2 because 2 is taken. I actually I got hacked by someone in Russia, and they stole my account. So I had to make a new one. Facebook, Jimmy Zito. You can find more about me there. My socials.
Awesome. And how would you recommend our listeners go about starting their own pirate life?
You know what? Don't assume that just because somebody thinks they know what they're doing, that they actually know what they're doing. Like, you're responsible for you. You need to think through this life. You only have one, and none of us are getting out of here alive. You need to think this through on your own and just take responsibility. Like, don't conform to what your wife thinks, what your boss thinks, what your husband thinks, what your friends think is best for your life. You need to decide for you what's best.
Yeah.
And make some mistakes.
Been there, done that.
Yes.
The very last, most important will be one that you enjoy. Do you know any pirate jokes?
Well, I work with kids, so I think I know a few. Why did the pirate go to the gym?
Why?
To get a better booty.
Good one.
Getting a good booty, doing the squats.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, Jimmy and his niece Claire also do a pirate impression.
Yeah.
So.
It's mostly her. I'm kind of just I'm trying to feed her the lines, and she made up a whole thing. It's on the socials. It's on the internet. It's
we'll
there.
Check it out. We'll go find it on the interwebs.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. This has been a lot of fun. Very interesting talking to you about all things religion and your take on it and how you're approaching it. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.
Can't end it.
It's rock and roll, guys. There are no rules. This one goes to 11.